Welcome everybody to Hunter Talks with me, your host, Hunter Wisłowski. Today we will be discussing the arts and architecture of the post-classical world civilizations such as the Byzantine, medieval, Islamic, Indian, and Chinese. So, and we have two very special guests with us, Miss Rachel Whalen, who will be with us first in a couple moments, and then Mr. Kelvin Pruitt, who will be with us later on in the show. So let's invite Miss Rachel Whalen to the stage. Hello, Miss Whalen. Okay, how you doing, Miss Whalen? I haven't seen you in a long time.
Good.
Okay, so our viewers asked, and we took a poll of what they wanted to know about the Asian civilizations. So the first question that was most recently asked was, in what ways did the Chinese influence the Vietnamese? And I see you have a model for us.
Yes, well, as you can see here from this model, there are upturned tiled roofs that they got from the Asian civilization China. And they also, you can't see it here, but they have long galleries. They did adapt different things, as you can see from the bridges, but they still have the upturned tiled roofs. And while they did affect the Vietnamese, they also affected the Japanese and the Korean.
Oh. It's a beautiful model, Miss Whalen. Okay, so our second question that was mostly recently asked was about the Tale of Genji and how artistically, how was it influenced by the Chinese?
Well, the Tale of Genji is a famous work of art that was Japanese literature, and it's about Japanese court life, which was also from the Chinese. But mostly it was literary, because the Japanese got their language from the Chinese, and this was the written language, not the spoken. And they gave them the characters, and the Japanese changed it a little bit, and that's how it affected this tale.
That's very interesting. Okay, Ms. Whalen. So another question that was asked was, throughout history, it has been shown that architecture has been a major aspect of cultural and religious life. For the Islamic societies, how did they influence their own?
Well, as you can see in this map, Islamic architecture in itself spread a lot through Africa, and along the Niger River, which is around...
It's in this area, right?
Down here, yes.
Okay.
But it was all spread down. That's just the Abbasid dynasty. But there's a great mosque that shows great examples.
Okay.
And the main influence was basically the religion itself, but they also combined the architecture they had with Islamic architecture.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Whalen. So another recently asked question was about Islamic literature. Now, can you give us some examples of that?
One example is the 1001 Nights. This is a very popular Islamic literature. It's also about court life, so we can tie it back to the Tale of Genji. And it talks mostly about court life. It is a little bit exaggerated, but it does show how much they went into court life.
Okay, so definitely throughout history, literature has been a major...
Yeah, it's been a major aspect too.
Okay, so our last question for you today, and we'll have you come back later, is about the Islamic and the Hinduism, how they mesh architecturally. So can you give us some examples of that?
Well, as you can see on this slide, there's the tomb of Ihmad-ud-Dawla.
Ooh, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. They built this tomb and they included some Islamic aspects. Well, they found the death very important because they thought about afterlife, because they encrusted into this tomb semi-precious stones, which could also come from Islam too, since they're both really religious.
Yes, I hope they do that for me. Alright, well thank you for your insightful facts about the Asian civilizations. We're going to have you back later, and now Mr. Kelvin Pruitt is going to come on about and teach us about the European civilizations.
Yeah.
How you doing, Kelvin? I haven't seen you in a long time.
Pretty good.
Alright. Okay, so, prop my feet up here. So, what can you tell us, asked by our audience, about Byzantine art?
Byzantine art, they took inspiration from the Roman Empire when they first initially started, but then they kind of developed their own kind of individual style of art. And then what's interesting is that there was an event that occurred kind of later on in their years called the iconoclasm, kind of depicted from Islam religion, that was, some people felt like they were worshipping these art they were drawing of, like, Jesus or whatever it was, religious, and so people started to destroy some of their art. So that's just an interesting fact about Byzantine art.
That is interesting. Now I see that there are a lot of different empires. I see the Byzantine, the Holy Roman Empire, so it was pretty extensive,
Yeah, Europe was pretty divided in this post-classical time.
very diverse. Okay, so I have a question for you. For the Byzantine art styles, how did that correlate to everyday life?
Well, life for all people in the Byzantine Empire during this time period was very religious. Like, their religion ran their lifestyle throughout most of this whole post-classical era until the fall of the Byzantines. And so, as you can imagine, their arts were either very religious, or there were some, like, kind of rare, not as often as, you see religious art, but there were some that were not as religious that would kind of correlate to everyday lifestyle, such as their, style of warfare, and whatnot.
That's a very gruesome picture with the king and it's obviously military and religious, it does go into everyday life. Okay, so we obviously know that there isn't a lot known about Byzantine architecture. Now, what we do know a lot about is the medieval architecture. Can you enlighten us on that?
Yeah. Here's an example of this medieval art. Initially, medieval art, similar to medieval architecture, similar to Byzantine art, they took inspiration from the Roman Empire prior to them, but then they developed their own kind of style, as you can see with these tall church spires and high art windows and whatnot. And this was called Gothic style of architecture. And so that just kind of shows you their individualism, and they developed their own kind of styles culturally and architecturally.
It's very beautiful, I must say. It's very beautiful. Okay, so our final question from Mr. Prudy, and then we're going to invite Ms. Whalen back out, is the Renaissance. Where did it start, and how did it change the arts?
The Renaissance, it started here in Italy, and during this post-classical period that we're talking about, it mainly stayed in Italy. It didn't get spread out more until you get into the modern era. And how it changed the arts is it started to shift what's called humanism. Like, it shifted from religious, more sort of secular subjects, such as putting humans as the center of their art. So, kind of just shifted them away from religious.
Yeah, so it's very interesting how that stuff changes. Okay, so we took a little commercial break, and now we have Mr. Calvin Pruitt again and Ms. Rachel Whalen. So the question that we are going to compare for the both of you, that our audience asked for, was so many civilizations have been affected by the Crusades, all from the Africans to the Islamic, and it started in Europe. So can you give us any similarities on how they were similar?
Well, the impact of the Crusades was definitely much more widely seen in the European civilizations, because we were much less advanced than the Islam civilization at the time. They took things such as their architectural style kind of was benefited from it. A lot of the scientists and intellectual stuff that the Islams had kept had just the impact was overall greater in Europe.
The Asians weren't affected as much due to the fact that we were more advanced than them, so we couldn't really take anything. We might have taken a few things, but not really impacting us. The only thing that really impacted us was the Europeans invaded the Holy Land, which we found a little offending, which caught our attention to the Crusades.
Yeah, because if you think about it, even geographically wise, you guys are a lot farther away when it started in their area. So, which leads to our next question. Okay, guys. So now we're going to move into the contrast part of it. The question was geographically wise. What's the difference?
Well, certain parts of Asia, such as Vietnam, they're more swampy because they're more like surrounded completely by water, and this caused them to change their architecture to adapt to this swampy and muddy area.
Yeah, and then in terms of Europe, it's more open and somewhat arid, not too much if you get near the Mediterranean Sea and whatnot, but this more openness led to their architectural styles being able to build up more, and they can build out more and whatnot, and not have to build around so much geographical barriers.
Okay, because I've been to Europe, so I know that that's true, and hopefully we will be able to make other adventures through to Vietnam and back to Europe. So that concludes our show. Thank you two for coming. And today, like I said, we went over the arts and architecture of the Byzantine, medieval, Islamic, Indian, and Chinese civilizations. Thank you guys.
Thank you.